Hey everybody, welcome to my top 5 music production software plugins. I always get a lot of questions asking me about different pieces of software I use and how I do certain things in producing my videos and producing music for CDs. And I have my hands in a lot of things, whether it's writing, demos or doing studio work or writing my own productions or creating tones or, and the list goes on, or transcribing music. The list goes on and on. So to do all of those things efficiently does take a certain workflow. And I'll tell you, it makes it a lot easier when you have the proper tools that can speed up a workflow and give you a better end product. So because of that, today I wanted to take a look at my top 5 plugins or pieces of software that I use in my music production and all those other activities that I do on a daily basis. So without further ado, let's jump over and look at number 5. Okay, so I have to admit I'm going to cheat a little bit right off the bat. I said my top 5 music plugins. I'm going to actually talk about an entire bundle of plugins from an amazing company called IZOTOPE. I really couldn't narrow it down to just one IZOTOPE plugin that I use regularly. In fact, I could probably do my top 10 software plugins and do nothing but IZOTOPE. So I figured I'd lump these all together and let you guys know what I do with these. So IZOTOPE is an audio plugin company that makes some incredible plugins that are very useful. As you can see, I have a lot of them. I have older versions like version 8, version 9, version 6, version 7. So I keep them on there because sometimes older projects still use the older versions. But something like RX7 and Ozone 9, Neutron 3, these are some of the most important plugins to my workflow and my production. What happens with the Music Production Suite 3 is it includes things like Neutron 3, which comes with a standalone kind of plugin that uses all sorts of the modules, or you have those modules separate. Ozone 9, RX7. RX7 is a really cool audio restoration type of a thing where you can fix things that are wrong with pieces of audio, and that's become an invaluable tool for me. So I want to jump through a few of these really quickly that I use a lot. And I'm not going to obviously have time to go through all of them, but Ozone 9, for instance, is one of the most useful plugins, and it's more of a mastering plugin. So what you can do is you can add different modules in here, everything from dynamic EQ, compressors, equalizers, exciters, imagers, low-end focus, master rebalance, EQ matching software within it, vintage limiters and distortion, tape emulators, you name it, it's got it in there. You can load in reference tracks so that you can compare your mix to another. And you can just add in whatever you want here. We've got equalizers, we've got limiters, etc. So it's a really nice little mastering suite, which on my music, when I do the guitar demo videos, I never want to touch the guitars at all and process them in the mix, so I don't use that. But I may use that on just the rhythm section, drums, bass, piano, right? And then process the guitars, or not process the guitars separately, just keep them outside of a particular bus, and I would use Ozone Advanced on that. Oftentimes when I'm doing my own music though, this will be my final mastering touch, right? They also have a plugin called Neutron 3, which is very, very interesting plugin because it's very similar, but it's more designed to be used on individual tracks. So it's got compression, exciters, the transient shapers, sculptors, gates, and whatnot. It'll even do this really interesting thing where you hit Mix Assistant and it'll ask you if it just wants you to enhance the track. And when you say yes, it'll ask you what kind of thing you're working with. Is it acoustic guitar? Is it drums and any other type of thing? Do you want it to sound warm, upfront, balanced? Do you want the intensity to be, the processing intensity to be very subtle or much more overt? And it'll listen to your track and make suggestions about how to make it better, and it'll give you those settings which you can then keep or discard. So really interesting stuff that allows you to kind of get to a final space in a much more efficient manner. One of the most important plugins included with it though, and this I use all the time, and it has sped up my workflow so much. So many of us work in home project studios where we don't have perfectly acoustically sound rooms. So a lot of times what we're hearing in our mix may be very influenced by the room we're in, and we're not sure if there's too much bass, too little bass, too much highs, maybe too much in the mid-range, and so on and so forth. So they have a plugin called Tonal Balance Control, which we put kind of as our last insert on our stereo bus. And as we play any music through this, it tells us if we're sort of within the proper range for a particular style of music. So here's a song that I did for my last album, and you can kind of just see how this works. So these bars here float around inside of these sort of parameter barriers, let's call them. We have lows, low mids, and high. And this kind of tells us if we're in the ballpark, if we have too much bass or too little bass. Now, the thing is we can choose different styles of music because you can say, well, some people like things bass heavy. You notice here the bass end goes up. Country music. And what they've done is they've just taken sort of averages of many hit songs in these styles. EDM, a little heavier on the bass, right? Folk. And they adjust all these ranges, jazz, modern. And we can also load in our own targets from here. What pops up is Rush Moving Pictures. So if I wanted to find out what the Tom Sawyer range was, I pop that in there, and now it gives me this narrow range of sort of what the EQ profile of Tom Sawyer is. So when we play our music, we know whether we're in that ballpark. Now there's no right and wrong here, right? We can decide if we want a little more bass and it's showing or less or whatever. And our ears are the final determining factor, but it sure does help us to know if we're in a certain range right off the bat, and it really, really is helpful. And just go back to the rock setting here. The crest factor is really interesting because that tells us the balance between sort of sustained bass sounds and kind of transient, quick bass sounds. So say, if we're way over here, we probably have maybe too much kick versus sustained bass notes. And over here, it might be too many sustained bass notes and maybe our kick's not cutting through. So just one of the uses for that. So as you can see, that moves around. And our goal is to have it between these two bars, which I have here. On this mix here, I might be a little touch high on the high mids, but again, it sounded fine to me. I seem to have a good crest factor and everything else is working. So that's a plugin that's really helped me to speed up my workflow, and it's an amazing addition to any music production situation. Now, another piece of software from their RX7, which is part of the Music Production Suite 3, which the RX7 is more of, like I said, audio restoration and to fix problems. Maybe you have too much reverb on something and it'll sort of de-reverb it with the particular plugin. But one particular one I really like is this spectral denoise. And what this does, let's take again a situation like what I have here. I have a small project studio. It's not acoustically sound. I have a computer. What if I want to record an acoustic guitar with a mic? Well, let's take this recording of an acoustic guitar, and I'm just going to turn this off. Now let's listen to the beginning of this. And again, I'm just going to loop this little section here. Sorry, I'll loop that in. You hear how noisy that is. There's a lot of noise at the beginning. Part of that's the fan off of the computer that was picked up by the microphone. I used a ribbon mic on this with a figure-8 pattern. It's picking up noise from the room. But we don't really want that on our final acoustic guitar track. So I can come in and listen to the acoustic here. While the acoustic sounds okay, you can hear that hiss and noise and fan noise in the background. Well, with RX7 Spectral Denoise, if I turn that on, what I can simply do is go back and sample the noise at the beginning. I'll just loop that and I'll tell it to learn. So now it's going to listen to what's going on with that noise. I hit learn again. Now with that plugin on, I'm going to replay that same section with the noise and listen to how it sounds now. It's almost gotten rid of that noise. Now you must say, well, that's going to affect the audio quality as well. Let's play a little bit of the guitar and I'm going to bypass this, and you'll hear the noise disappear, but you won't so much hear anything going on with the guitar itself. So take a listen to this. Watch at the bottom as I bypass it here so you can hear the difference. That amazing? You hear the noise go away, but the guitar tone doesn't really get affected. And even if it is subtle, it's nothing you can't go in and sort of sculpt back with EQ. So I've used that a lot of times even with just single coil pickups where there's kind of maybe a really distorted sound and they're noisy single coils. You go and you capture a little bit of the single coil sound and then it takes it out of the audio. And I used that on my last album a lot just to get rid of when I was using P90s or something like that. And wow, all of a sudden that noise was gone. And only when it was, you know, very overt and over the top. So those are some of my favorite plugins from iZotope. All right, next up is Guitar Pro 7. Now I've talked about Guitar Pro 7 a fair amount in previous videos, but it is such an important part of my workflow, and here's why. I mentioned in a video yesterday that I did where I was talking about composing, and I said, you know, when I compose and I'm writing riffs on the guitar, even if I just stumble across something that I really like, a lot of times the first thing I do is I rush over to Guitar Pro 7 and I transcribe it out simply because I want to be able to remember it. From years of teaching guitar, I've become fairly proficient at just sort of sight reading tab and being able to write it out. And I really encourage people to get better at that. It's a really great tool to have in our back pocket for composing. And I find sometimes when we see things visually and we understand things visually, musically like that, it can help us to go different places with our composition as well, which is kind of helpful. But it's more also about recalling old ideas, right? So if I want to come back and do a playthrough video, or if I want to revisit a song, maybe use it as a demo for a new tone, I've got these charts here that I can quickly grab and use. Now, to create new ones is so simple. We can just go to here, create a new file from template. I could say, you know, electric guitar overdrive. And I've got a starting point. It gives me 120 beats per minute. I can click on that, change that to, I don't know, 100 beats per minute if I want it to be. And all we do is we use our arrows. Once you learn the key shortcuts with this, it's very simple. And then I can just hit my numbers, right? If I want the 5th fret on the 3rd string, I do that. If I use my plus and minus keys, I can change the type of note it is. So if I want an 8th note there, let's say I want that to be a hammer on. I hit H, that's gonna, I move over with my arrow. Let's say we hammer on to 7. Say after that, I want a quarter note there. Let's say I want some triplets. I hit my question mark key, that turns that into triplets. Let's say I want that to be 8th note triplets, you know, and then we could take that, slide that into the 10th fret. And there you have it, right? So I can really write quickly with this once you learn some of the keyboard shortcuts and whatnot. Very seldom do I use it to play back the audio. I mean, sometimes I'll listen to the kind of cheesy MIDI guitar. It's more just to get the idea down, and then you can end up with really nice scores. You can have multiple guitar parts. Here I have rhythm guitars 1 through 4, lead guitars 1 and 2. I could look at all of those at the same time, or I could turn just individual parts on and check out just individual ones or compare them side by side. So very, very useful tool and something I use all the time. So Guitar Pro 7 is an excellent tool for anybody who's composing, learning music, you know, and many other. The other nice thing is you can just go online, search songs, and there's so many, you know, pre-transcribed songs available that we can just load in. And the beauty about it is it works with standard notation as well, but we also have the rhythmic note values, which I find really invaluable. All right, let's move on to the next one, number 3. And I'm going to cheat a little bit again. And this is a software company I have done videos about recently, TOONTRACK. Superior Drummer 3, Easy Bass. Absolutely invaluable to me. I just can't tell you enough how often I use these tools. Superior Drummer, I want to show you a few things here. I have done this before when showing how I make backing tracks and whatnot. But there's some very, very interesting tools that we have at our disposal here. And I want to show you how quickly we could throw together some ideas. So Superior Drummer 3 comes with its sort of own Superior Drummer 3 sound library, which is excellent. But I've purchased other ones. I've purchased the Decades one, Rooms of Hansa, the couple New York packs, Orchestral Percussion, Progressive Foundry, the Rock Foundry, so I have a lot of options. The Rock Foundry was made with producer Bob Rock. It's a killer sound. But even within the Rock Foundry, there's numerous drum kits we can load up, right? I could, with the click of a mouse, have a Ludwig kit here from the, which one was this that I choose? A 1967 Ludwig kit. Totally different sound to it, right? And I could just also go back to the default kit that I like so much as well. Okay, so when you're hearing my demos, you're hearing varieties of these. Now, the nice thing is when you buy a drum pack, you also get a bunch of drum grooves. And if you go up to the Grooves tab here, you can see that. I've got a huge number of drum grooves. So I could go in here and say alt rock grooves, you know, straight 4/4 time mid-tempo verse. Go to a different one. And it's endless possibilities here. Pocket grooves. You know, so these are great to have at our disposal. So I could come into something as simple as say hard rock groove, straight 4/4, mid-tempo verse. When I find one I like, I can simply drag it down to the timeline down here and hit play. So I could say, okay, maybe I'm happy with that. Then we could just get out of that for a second. Actually, no, let's do this. A lot of folks have said to me with this, like, well, yeah, but then you're tied into that groove and whatnot. Well, if I double click that, it takes me up to the groove editing tab, which I can actually go in with the grid editor, and I could edit each note individually, which is what I've shown before, but I can also do edit playstyle, which is really neat. Take something like this groove, I could move it from being, let's say, they call it power hand. We don't want it on the hi-hat. I could simply take the power hand, I could drag that over to the ride cymbal, and now listen to our groove. That simple, I've changed all those hi-hat hits to ride hits. You could say, well, I want more of a bell on the ride. Okay, fine. You go into the articulations here and I can go bell tip. Okay, now listen to our groove. So you can see I can change the articulations real easy. What if I want that power hand on a tom? That's simple to change things up. Now, let's say I wanted more kick drum. Well, I can select the kick drum, and as this is playing, I can use my amount knob to add more hits or have hits taken away. Really interesting stuff and very simple to use. I can also have it so maybe I don't want the kick drum hitting as hard. I can use the velocity control. So a lot of amazing tools, which are actually updated right in the MIDI file. If I take the amount of kick, you'll see that the MIDI notes are actually added over here, so I could even come in and selectively pick and choose. Really amazing, amazing stuff from the folks at TOONTRACK, and such an incredible time saver for coming up with ideas and for your own music, or even just for creating backing tracks or what have you. Now, let's say we have that rhythm and I want to put something with bass to that. Well, look how quickly I can do that with Easy Bass. And again, the nice thing here, I love the fact that I can resize windows to perfect sizes right away, 920 by 1080, and there it is. So we can have different basses, but I also have a groove library here where I could pick any style. Let's just clear the filters here. I could say, okay, let's do rock, hard rock, straight feel, and they give us some grooves. I have no idea how this is going to work with what I did with the drums, but let's just drag this down here and see what happens. I mean, it works. Whether it's what we want or not is a different story. But let's say we say, well, you know what? To me, it sounds too high. I would like it an octave lower. So coming over here to edit play style, we can do something similar. I can drop that an octave just like that. I can play around with the velocity, the number of notes again. So watch this. So I can alter those grooves very simply. If I want it more muted sounding, if I want the velocity to be louder or softer. So amazing stuff by the folks at TOONTRACK. I can double click on that and get the actual notes here as well, and I could edit those individually if I wanted. But another great feature is this. I can also just come down here and click on the chords. You see how it says A minor through all this? Let's say I want to start on A minor. I click on the next chord. Let's make that a C. Let's make the next one F, and the next one a G. Now let's listen to what happened. Now that C went down really low, so I could select just the C, pop that back up an octave. Now what if I wanted different transitions? Well, I could select this, I could go to transition. So I selected my first chord, transition off, let's do, I don't know, a short transition. And you see it changes the notes at the end here. Gives us a little transition. Let's pick C and we'll do a medium transition. Let's pick the F and we'll do a long transition. And then I could also do things like selecting individual notes and then adding slides into them. Smooth slide, let's see what happens there. Yeah, maybe not what you want, or maybe it is. But so many great tools here to create backing tracks so quickly that we could be up and running with, and spark new ideas as well. So that's just a quick overview of that. Some of my favorite pieces of software from TOONTRACK: Superior Drummer 3 and EasyBass. On to the next one, and probably no surprise to anybody, would be Helix Native. I use Helix Native so often, it's just not even funny. And a lot of folks might say, well, you already have a Helix, you have a Stomp, you have a Pod Go, what do you need Helix Native for? Well, one thing I always do is capture my DI'd track, right? And what better way to reamp than by throwing Helix Native on? You know, a lot of folks think the big question is, does it sound the same as Helix? And in my experience, and I've done videos on it before, I cannot tell the difference between Helix, Helix LT, even Pod Go, Stomp, and Helix Native. To me, they all just sound the same. You know, so yes, we can use it to replace it, and it's going to sound exactly the same. So a lot of times in a mix, I can just load in a quick instance of Helix Native, grab what I need to grab, and I'm up and running in no time. It saves me so much time just getting new sounds and being able to tweak things in the mix. There's so much processing power inside Helix, and Helix Native just puts that into our computer. So Helix Native is a huge time saver for me and one of my top pieces of software. All right, last but not least, CUBASE 10.5 Pro. And you've been seeing it throughout this video because it's kind of my host of where I get everything accomplished. It's where I load in Superior Drummer and EasyBass. Obviously not Guitar Pro, but all my IZOTOPE plugins live in here. Helix Native lives in here, right? So this video could never go through all the features of CUBASE. I don't even know how to use all the features of CUBASE. It's such an in-depth program. I know how to do the things I need to do with it. And, you know, there's features in it that I would never even use. But what an amazing DAW for doing live recording, for doing music production, for using MIDI. They have filled it with so many great features. So one of the ways that I do use it though is I set up a template, and I just call it my, you know, my music production template. So that when I'm ready to write some music or do a demo, I can hit that template and it loads up everything for me just the way I want it. And some of those things are, you'll see up here it says actual song. If I'm trying to mimic a song that already exists, I will load that song up just so I can hear what the tones are like in comparison, or the mix is like in comparison, you know. And what I'll do is I'll even have that sometimes bust over to a different cue send, so I can bounce back and forth between my mix and the cue mix, which in this case would be the actual song. I do that sometimes depending on how I'm working. If you notice here, it says rhythm section. Well, that's a bus where I have all my drums, Superior Drummer, EasyBass, Easy Keys, and my IK Multimedia Hammond organ bus to that. So what happens there is I can then process those sounds differently. And you notice here it says rhythm section here. And what I'll do is I'll load on an instance of Ozone 9 onto that, so that the only stuff that's going to get processed by Ozone 9, if I want to EQ my drums or my bass or my keyboards or put a maximizer limiter on it, I can do that, and it's always set up for me ready to go right here. And that will only have, you'll notice if I go to the inputs on these, or the outputs, sorry, this goes to group called rhythm section, EasyBass goes to rhythm section, Easy Keys goes to rhythm section, and Hammond is something I recently put in there, which would also go to the rhythm section. But everything else, my guitar outs go to the stereo out, so they would not get processed with the same processing. So I have those ready to go, and then I can click on any of those at any point and pull up Superior Drummer, I can pull up EasyBass, I could pull up any of the other featured plugins that I need, such as IK Multimedia's Hammond organ plugin, which is really nice. I also then add in, and let me get rid of my mixer here, I add in all these guitar tracks, 8 of them. But if you notice, I go guitar 1, guitar DI1, and that's muted. Guitar 2, guitar DI2. And what happens is the guitar is set to get the processed Helix signal, but I always have, and I arm these if I'm going to record, I have those armed so that I'm always recording the dry guitar at the same time. So if I want to reamp with Helix, and if you notice, I pull this channel up, I've got an instance of Helix Native on it ready to go, but bypassed in case I want to just turn that on and be up and running with Helix Native. If we go back to my mixer, I also start doing things like guitar 1 is pan to the left, guitar 2 is pan to the right, 3 and 4 are panned left and right, then these 5 and 6 are panned more to the center, guitar. So everything is set up so I can just start recording and know where everything is, and that's what allows me to get so much work done so quickly and so effortlessly, right? If we come out to my stereo bus, I also have this great piece of software, which is called Arc 3, which is a room equalizer. So I've analyzed my room with a special measurement mic, and it's created a frequency response EQ curve to flatten the sound of my speakers. And so when I'm mixing, that's wonderful. And then all I do is I turn that off on the final mix. And if you notice what else I have here, I have on the tonal balance control I showed you about before. And I also always put a maximizer on the end. But if you notice, I just have the threshold set to 0. I'll set this so that it never affects any of the guitar tones if I'm doing a guitar demo, but it's just to prevent any of the drum hits or anything else from spiking up and peaking and distorting the final output. So I'll adjust this just to get the levels up so they're loud enough, but without it actually squashing anything. So I'll always have that there as a bit of a protection. So that's how I utilize Cubase for my writing, utilizing all of the pieces of software that we talked about today, except for Guitar Pro 7. That's always open on a different screen, and I'm ready to go with that as I compose, and then I can use that to play into this as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope that, there's a lot of pieces of software in there a lot of folks know I used before, but I thought I would do a video where I just kind of condensed it all down so anybody that wants to see how my workflow goes and the tools that I use to do the things I do, this is really it. These are some of my favorite companies, and there are other ones, right? IK Multimedia makes a lot of great plugins. I really like their stuff as well. PSP Audio is amazing, and you name it. There's endless plugins that I really enjoy out there, but these are the ones that I tend to, at least as of now, use on a very regular basis. So if you guys want to go take a look at any of those companies, I'll put the links to all the software below, and click through and support those companies. I don't have any affiliation with any of the companies other than Line 6, obviously. So I'm not being paid to do this or given anything by these. I've purchased all of this software. I just love using it. It's amazing software. And I think if it can help any folks out there to increase their productivity and get their workflow to a place where it's going to help them to work smoother and more efficiently, then wonderful. And I think these plugins are amazing for that. And what a time we live in to have all these incredible plugins at our disposal. So please buy this software from the companies and support them, because these guys are doing amazing things, which makes our musical life so much better. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. Please like the video, share it if you don't mind. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the little bell notification. I'll have a lot more content coming out soon, and it'd be wonderful if you guys get notified when it comes out so you can watch it right away. Thanks again, guys. I will be back very soon with some more content. Thanks for tuning in, and ciao for now.